Hi everyone, it's Rita with Everything Homemade, and this is the first video that's going to kick off a series of videos on back to basics in the kitchen in preparation for the Everything Stevia cookbook to come out in fall 2022. It's really important to know the basics in the kitchen, so I'm also making a video series on the exact same chapter that will also be in the cookbook. So definitely check out our website at everything-homemade.com, subscribe, and stay up to date when that cookbook is coming out. So let's get started. So the very first video that will kick off this series is how to make a sourdough starter. And in the Everything Stevia cookbook, I have a recipe for bread pudding. I have a whole wheat variation for it and a gluten-free variation for it. And in the whole wheat variation, I'm using sourdough bread. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. If I call for applesauce or yogurt or cream cheese or whipping cream, whether that's dairy-free or gluten-free, all those are also in the back to basics section of the cookbook on how to make it. You're not reliant just on the store for those. I will teach you how to make those. So let's kick this off. Let's make a sourdough culture, and the next video we're going to make the bread. So I'm going to make the sourdough culture two different ways. One, I'm going to use a natural boost to just get that culture going, and the other way I'm going to use it as if I only have wheat and water. So there's those two methods that you can use. So in order to start your culture, you need to make sure you're using a glass bowl. Glass bowls are really important because if you use a stainless steel or plastic bowl, it actually prohibits the culture from growing. So we definitely want to use glass here. Now I have two bowls here because, like I said, I'm going to make this two different ways. So let's remove a glass bowl and let's focus on the first way of doing this. So what you want to do is use 1 cup of freshly milled, if possible, organic whole wheat flour. Now I'm using red hard wheat here, and this is freshly milled. It's organic wheat, and you really want organics in this case because you don't want to have the chemicals or sprays and all that on your in your flour. So 1 cup here. Then what you want to do is add 2/3 cup of water, and this is non-chlorinated water. That's very important. And then you want to mix it together. So it just will come together. It'll be a little bit sloppy, but this is how it will look. Just mix it all together. So this is the starting, and it doesn't look like anything real that special right now, but it'll definitely change in consistency once we let it set. So what the goal is here is to allow the bacteria, so the good bacteria naturally found in the air, to get captured in the wheat and water mix that I have here and begin to multiply. This technique goes back all the way. This is a very, very old technique, and this is how they did it when they didn't have cultures. And you'll notice that sourdough cultures change flavor from location to location. So someone in Europe, their sourdough culture will taste different than mine, than from somebody, let's say in Australia, or let's say in Russia, or in Iceland, United States, you name it. And even countrywide, my sourdough culture, let's say, will taste different at the way that I make it here than it will be a mile down the road at my neighbor's place. So that's why there's so many variations of cultures, and some people are like, hey, I like that culture I tasted in France, or hey, I like that culture I tasted in Iceland. And this goes down to yogurt making. You can capture the bacteria from the air to make a distinct yogurt, and People love Icelandic yogurt for that particular strain, and that's them just taking that pot of warmed up milk and placing it in certain spots around the property to capture that bacteria. And when you taste it, you're like, oh, I love that particular strain, so you continue to multiply it. And that's the same concept that we're doing here. We're using our natural environment to make the sourdough culture. Okay, so now that we're done that part, the next part is important. You need to cover this. Now, I like using tea towels, and I'm just going to fold my tea towel here in half, and I'm just going to slip it over. I like tea towels because it's impossible for bugs to get in here, like fruit flies or other little things that fly in the air. And I just find that it doesn't dry things out. You can use a cheesecloth without a problem. Even if you got a piece of material, piece of fabric, put it on, like use what you got. I'm all about using what you have. So now I'm gonna use these binder clips because I have a ton of them. If you don't have binder clips, find some kind of clip that will, hold this taut around your bowl. You don't have to use clips if you don't want to. I just like that this is secure. It's not gonna droop. You accidentally drop something. It's got a little more forgiveness. That's the only reason why I prefer to clip it down like this. So if you are like me and have cats in the house, this is a trick that I taught myself, is using these cooling racks. Cooling racks work great. If you take your bowl, put a cooling rack on top, then place it on the counter, the cats won't step in your bowl. They won't, even if they walk over this, they're not going to contaminate my culture. This is just makes it cat proof. So this is awesome. And this is all you need to do for day one. And what you're going to do is let this sit for 24 hours on your counter at room temperature. It's important to be room temperature because the culture will grow when things are warm, but you don't want it to grow too fast. If it's too fast or too hot in the house above room temperature, then you're going to grow mold. It's going to go the other way, and too cold, nothing will grow. So this room temperature is a happy medium, a perfect temperature for cultures to grow. So this is your first step. This is day one. And I'm just going to set this aside. And now we're going to do this with a kind of a boost to get things going. So this one here will grow faster than the one that we are doing from scratch, but that's no big deal. So again, we're going to start this the exact same way. 1 cup of organic milled whole wheat flour. Then what we're going to do is do 1/3 cup water. This is non-chlorinated water. And then I have 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice. This is freshly squeezed lemon juice. You do not want to use lemon juice from the bottle. This is freshly squeezed lemon juice with all the bacteria in it. And that's what I'm going to use. I really love the flavor of this particular culture when I use lemon juice. I love it. And I'm going to use a clean wooden spoon to do this one. I'm not going to use the same one because I don't want to introduce anything from that particular batch. Okay, so again, same kind of thing. You want to mix it about. Now, what if you don't got lemons? Well, you can blend up plums with the skin. Plums have a natural yeast on them and can kickstart. Just remember, make sure it's organic. You can also use grapes. Grapes have a natural yeast coating. Now you want to use organic. You don't want to use grapes that are treated with sulfites. You really want organic grapes here. Again, no pits. Blend it up, get 1/3 of a cup. You can also kickstart this with kombucha as well. That'll kickstart it too. But it all comes down to personal preference. Every time you change your kind of booster culture, you will get a different flavor of bacteria. You'll get a different flavor. So right now, the easiest thing for me to use is lemons. I got that readily available at the moment. So I'm gonna go lemons, and it is one of my favorites. Again, same kind of look, same kind of consistency. Now again, we need to get a tea towel. Now I'm not going to fold this tea towel because this bowl's a little bit wider than the other one. There we go. And again, what I'm going to, and with this one, I'm actually going to do a double tea towel just because I don't want things to dry out. So it's going to look something like that. I'm also going to put a cooling rack on top. And what we're going to do again, same thing, is we're going to allow this to just sit on the counter at room temperature for 24 hours. And then I'll be back to show you what you do on day 2. Okay, we're back here for day number 2. So let's take a look at the cultures now that they sat for 24 hours. This one was the first one we did. This was just with the water and the wheat. So let's just take a look. Okay, so you can see what it looks like there. So let's just move it around. Okay, you see that? Take a look at that. You see how it's kind of a little more stringy, a little more sticky? That's a really good sign. Really good sign. This little bit darker spots, don't worry about it. It's just a little bit dry, but once you move it all together, it's just fine. But you see how the consistency has changed. You see that stickiness, that kind of stringiness? That is a really good sign. This is what you want to see. You see that when I move my wooden spoon? Total different consistency. Now there's no bubbles or anything like that, so there's really not culture. You know, there could be some culture maybe setting, but it's not really growing. Right now we're just getting that almost like that pre-digested wheat look to it. This is what happens when you soak your wheat. It changes consistency and makes things taste really good. So right now things are looking good. So what we need to do with this right now is just add in 1/4 cup of fresh flour. Now the reason we do this is to feed whatever culture is trying to grow here. We need to continue to feed it. And even though you can't see, you know, physically with your eyes, like the evidence of bubbles, like that fermentation process, there's something going on, and this is what we want to keep going. I also want to add 1/4 cup of just warm water, not hot, kind of room temperature water, and mix that together. Whatever you do, you always want to do equal parts water to flour. I find it just easy to do 1/4 cup water to 1/4 cup flour. So we're gonna get that mix. You're gonna get a bit of a dry crust around your bowl, but that's no big deal. Okay, mix that in really good. And that's all you do for day number 2. And again, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to cover it and then set it aside for 24 hours to sit on the counter and continue to work its magic. Just like that. So I'm going to set that aside. Now bowl number 2. It looks a little bit different. It actually has a lighter browning here than it did with the other ones. So let's just take a closer look at it. So let's just mix this up. Now you can see the same effect happening. You see that stringiness? Same thing. See that? Totally different. I'm going to do that slow because it's actually pretty cool. Well, I find it pretty cool how that dough just changes consistency after 24 hours. I think that's pretty cool. Look at that. That's cool, eh? It's kind of sticky, and you know when things are going right when it looks like that. Okay, so what we want to do here, again, we don't see any physical bubbles or anything like that, but the magic is happening. So what we need to do is feed this, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. 1/4 cup of whole wheat, freshly milled flour. And again, 1/4 of a cup of room temperature water. And I'm going to mix that in. And again, we do the exact same thing. We cover this up. And we put it on the counter off to the side. There we go. And it's just gonna sit there now for 24 hours. So this is day 3, and what we're gonna do today is actually the exact same thing we did on day 2. Exciting. Okay, you got to get a closer look at this. Okay, so do you see there? I know my mixture is moving down because I'm just angling this, but do you see that bubble? And that bubble? And that bubble? So this sometimes can happen on day 3 or day 4, depending on, but it actually happened on day 3. This is really cool. That means that we have some culture in here. We have some culture growing, so this is an awesome thing. This is just the beginning. You saw only a few bubbles. This is really, really good. So what we're gonna do is exact same thing as before. We're going to add 1/4 of a cup of water, and we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of the whole wheat flour. We're going to mix it in, and this is gonna feed that culture. And you can see too when I'm stirring, you can see how stringy. You can see that consistency. So cool. Okay, little guys, you eat up. So they're fed for another 24 hours, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. And you can see the color is also lightening as well. So that's really cool to see. And you can also see when I'm done mixing it, you can also see little bubbles forming after I'm done, and that's all a really good sign. These are all really good signs. So once again, I'm gonna do the exact same thing here. I'm going to cover this up and set it aside for another 24 hours. Okay, so I'm excited to see the one with the lemon juice added to it. Excited to see what is going on there. And in this one here, we have a little bit of water separation right here, and that is pretty normal, but we do have a slight bubble right here. It's a little bit hard to see. It's a little bit hard to see, but there is. So this one's starting too, but actually the other one that I didn't have lemon juice is actually going faster, which is usually kind of the opposite, but hey, anything can happen. So this one's coming along too, but it's lagging just a little bit behind, but it is coming as well. Okay, so again, we'll mix this up. You got this really nice color, and we do the exact same thing. 1/4 of a cup of water and 1/4 of a cup of the milled whole wheat. Now you got to remember that when you're working with cultures, even though this is happening a little bit opposite, where the one that I expected to go to get cultured a little later started to get cultured before this one. Anything can happen in nature. It depends on, you know, what was in the air. It just happened faster, no problem. But I also really, really love the flavor of the lemon juice getting that culture together. There's a different flavor between the two, and that's pretty awesome, especially for pancakes, because we do make sourdough pancakes. So I really like that. And for my sourdough bread, I really like the other culture. So hey, it all comes down to your own personal preference. But you can also see here, you can see the bubbles forming. So there is culture, it's just not as strong yet as the previous one. Oh, this is so cool. You know what? I just can't get enough of working with cultures. I love to see them grow and multiply. Okay, so once again, if you can take a look, I don't know how well that is showing up on the camera, but there is little tiny bubbles here. Again, really good signs, really good signs. So that is only on day 3. And this really, one of the biggest factors here is temperature. When I redid a sourdough culture in the middle of winter, my house was cooler, so it took an extra day. On day 4, I started seeing the bubbles. But here it's spring now, and the house is naturally warmer. It's happening a day faster. So temperature really plays a critical role in how fast this can happen. So once again, we'll just set this aside, and we are all done. It is day 4, and I'm super excited to see how much bubbles, how much action we're going to see underneath the cloths. Look at that. You can see the bubbles. Look at, and there's some small ones, some bigger ones, all over. This is looking really, really good. So again, it's just starting to build up that, I call it like an army of culture, but build up the soldiers to build this army. I'm going to use that analogy. It's going to grow bigger. It's going to grow stronger. And that's what we want to do. But in order for it to do that, we need to feed it. Again, 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour. And again, 1/4 cup water. And we're feeding it. Mixing it. Oh, just beautiful color. There's no bad odor coming from this. Actually hardly even smells, and that's what you want. Just beautiful color. And there is some dryness on the ridge, but no big deal. You can soak your bowl after in water and it'll clean up really nice. And that is it. Once again, just continue to feed it. It's day 4 and it's looking really, really good. So we cover it back up like we did for the last few days and set it aside once again on your counter. Okay, let's take a look at the one with the lemon juice. Again, we got beautiful bubbles here. Right there, we got some bigger ones this time. Remember last one was just really slight, so this one seems to be behind 1 day. But we got that solid action happening here, which is wonderful. Again, let's feed it. 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour, 1/4 cup water. In we go. Mix it up. So when you're doing this at home, it does not take you long to feed your sourdough culture. You know, it takes me a little bit longer because I'm filming here, but in reality, you got basically 2 minutes. Take off the top, put in your stuff, set it aside, and on you go. So it's really easy to prep that way. So once again, everything's mixed. We're feeding it. And now we just put it on the counter, and I will see you back here once again for day 5. It's day 5 and I'm excited once again to see how much growth, how much bubbles we're going to see this time. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So you can see here that there's a little bit of liquid forming at the bottom. You see that? Right there. Let's take a little close up. So when I lift it up, there's that liquid right there. That liquid means that actually my culture is hungry. And it's like an alcoholic fermented liquid. That tells me that it is revving. We got a culture here that needs to be fed. Again, 1/4 cup water, 1/4 cup flour, and get this culture fed. Mix that right back in there. And we're so close to the end. Soon we're going to be able to make sourdough bread, which is going to be so awesome. But just hang with me. Okay, this one's done. So let's check the other one here. Okay, looking good. This one here, you can tell there's no liquid, so we're definitely multiplying. Take a look at how much it's kind of splitting away. It's kind of frothy. This is awesome. So let's refresh this one again. Same thing, 1/4 cup water, 1/4 cup flour, and this one here has more of a pungent smell now, but it's not a gross smell. It's a really nice fermented, how do you explain that? It's fermented, it's kind of sweet, has a little bit of sour undertones, but really pleasant. That typical sourdough smell, that's what it has. There you go, refreshing it again. Everything looks good. There's no mold on either of them, and that's it. That's all we need here. So with the warm temperatures that we're having, this is basically sped up by a day. Normally this takes 7 days, so we're on day 5, where normally you would see this more on day 6. But that's okay, and that's what I say, that temperature plays a significant role in how fast this goes. So in the Everything Stevia cookbook, I do have it for 7 days. But again, I do mention it just depends on the temperature. Things can move a little faster. So tomorrow what we're going to do is actually set up how to store our culture, and then how to continue feeding it after, because you can get your culture to going on and on and on for years. And I'll teach you how to do that, and then we will start on the next video, which is how to make sourdough bread. So we're so close to the end, and I can't wait to finish it off tomorrow. So this is day 6, and this is the moment you have all been waiting for. The sourdough culture, it's done. So what I'm going to do today is going to teach you how to store your sourdough culture. So take a look at this one. This was the one where we just started the culture by using the whole wheat flour and the water and the culture in the air to get our sourdough culture. And you can see how frothy this is. It's actually bubbling. The whole thing is bubbling. It's alive. So let's take a closer look. Do you hear that when I move the bowl? Listen carefully. You hear that? That is an awesome sound. Because the dough has actually risen a bit, it makes that particular sound, and I find it very exciting. So this is definitely ready for storage, and you want to store your sourdough culture in the fridge. What I like to do is just use used yogurt containers. So I'm going to use the 750 milliliter containers. And this basically will fill the container halfway. So let's do that. I recommend that you soak your bowls. You have this really heavy dried rim of water and flour. Soak it for a couple of hours with a little bit of warm water and soap, and this will scrub up really nice and clean at the end. So now that we have the culture in the yogurt container, it's important to feed it. You can see the bubbles actually in here. Let's get a close-up look. You can see the bubbles. Isn't that neat? Okay, so what we need to do is feed it. And again, we're doing the same proportion as we were doing all week. 1/4 of a cup water and 1/4 of a cup flour. The rule of thumb is how much water you're using is the same amount of flour. So let's say you wanted to increase your culture a little faster, then put 1/2 cup of water and 1/2 cup of flour. And that gives you the perfect consistency of your sourdough culture. So mix it in. And now it's ready to put it in the fridge. Now the reason why you place your sourdough or store your sourdough culture in the fridge is to make it go dormant. Just like any cultures, just like most cultures that go into the fridge, it stops the cultures from multiplying rapidly. It doesn't halt them completely, but it does slow them down. And that way you don't have to refresh your culture every single day, but I do recommend that you refresh your sourdough culture once a week. So make a habit of making something with sourdough once a week to refresh that. And in another video, I will go over on how to refresh your culture, what to do if you're going away for a long holiday, and what happens, and how to problem solve your culture. So I'll save that for another video. But for right now, definitely feed your culture once a week. So make sourdough pancakes or sourdough bread or sourdough muffins. There's lots of recipes out there. But what you want to do is take this out the night before, warm it up, get that culture multiplying again, for at least 8 hours ahead of time, and then refresh it. Give it some food. 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour and 1/2 cup of water, or 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour, 1/4 cup of water. Get it fed and ready to use. So it's a constantly taking some culture out. So let's say your recipe calls for 1/4 of a cup or 1/2 cup of culture. You take it out. Whatever you take out, you want to replenish back. And that way you can have this going for days after days, weeks, months, years. If you keep it refreshed once a week, keep it healthy and strong. So let's do the same thing to the other culture. Now this particular culture I like to use for bread. I like the flavor of this one for bread making in particular. And so what I like to do is just use some painter's tape, and I just write bread sourdough starter on it. So that way everybody knows what it is in the fridge and doesn't mistake this as my homemade yogurt, because my yogurt also gets stored in the same kind of containers. And because I have 2 different cultures in the fridge, it's important that it is labeled. So that one is done. So now we're going to do the same procedure for the second one, culture. Now remember, the second culture was made with lemon juice. And this particular one, I like it for pancakes. It has a little bit of a milder flavor than the one that we just did. And take a look at it. Beautiful, has lots of bubbles, has a wonderful scent to it, and you can hear it again. Take a look, you see all those bubbles right here. So it's ready to, and so what we're going to do is grab a new spoon, because you don't want to cross-contaminate your cultures, and put it in the yogurt container. And before we put it in the fridge, let's feed it. Let's label it. And now I'm going to place it in the fridge. So thank you so much for watching. Check out our website, and in the next video, we're going to make sourdough bread.